Hey class, in this video we're going to do a Photoshop intro. So we're going to use some software for the first time. And for this video, what I would really love for you to do is follow along with pretty much every step that I do. I'll kind of say when you should do something slightly different or do exactly what I'm doing. But at least for these early videos when we're starting to learn, it's going to be helpful. So what I would recommend doing is watching the video and then pausing at points when I've done a couple steps and then redoing those steps or creating those steps on your computer and then continuing to follow along. So it may be a little bit slow at first, but I think it'll help in the long run. So a couple things I'm going to do. Let's make a little list. So I'm just going to get a little text document up here. And I'll just make a list of what we're going to work on today. So one, I'm going to go over a little bit of just like file organization basics. Some of you guys may be pretty good at this already, so you may want to skip this part. I'll put some timestamps so you can skip ahead if you want to. But I think this will probably be useful for a lot of you guys, especially if you haven't, worked with a computer too much. This might be useful. So I'm going to go over some basics with that, and I'll kind of move on and not cover all the basics all the time, but at the beginning of the class I'll try to cover some of the basics just so you guys aren't confused about what I'm doing when I'm using my computer. So we'll do some file organization. We're going to get a couple images from the internet. So we're going to get some source images, and I'll talk a little bit about the process for that. And what we're going to do is composite those images together. So that's kind of the main goal of our demo today. And it's actually not too hard. It's not going to take us too long, but it's a good chance to kind of go over some of the basics. So we'll get a couple source images from the internet. Then we will composite those images. And that's pretty much it. We'll export a file, which we'll post on the blog in our next video. So export a file. And so this would be a good kind of light intro. I'm going to go over a lot of really basic stuff. Some of the stuff may seem very obvious or something that you've done before. And that's fine. That's probably a good thing. But for a lot of you guys, it's going to be new. And so, just take your time. If you have questions, come visit me in office hours and we can go over it, or send me an email or message on Discord. And, at this point in the semester, we're just getting started. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have. So let's get into it. I'm going to go over a little bit of what's going on my computer. I'm on a Mac computer. So if you're on a Windows, it may look a little bit different, but most of the same things work basically the same either way. But I'm going to go over what we're looking at for a second, because you can see I don't have a lot going on the computer. I like to keep things very minimal and organized. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about what you're looking at. So let's go into that view. So one thing you'll probably notice is that you don't see the dock. If you're a Mac user, you're used to seeing your dock with all your programs. My dock's over here. I don't really like to look at it. It takes up a lot of space. I don't use it very much, but it is there, so I can see it if I want to. So that's just where that is. You don't have to do that, obviously. You can do whatever you want, but if you want to turn hiding on, that's where you would find it. So I just right-clicked with my mouse, which is the button on the right, versus the left mouse button, which is the button that you use most of the time. So what we're going to do first is do some file organization. So on the Mac, we use this thing called the Finder. It's the little guy right here. I can click on the Finder and that will open up a window that looks like this. Mine might look a little bit different than yours, and I'll talk about that in a second. If you're on Windows, you're going to use the File Explorer, and that just looks like a little yellow folder, and it works pretty much the same way. There's a little bit of a different interface, but you should pretty easily be able to do anything on your Windows machine that I'm doing on here. So you'll probably notice with my my Finder, I have like some pretty, different settings than what you might have, and that's fine. I'll show you the main couple things that I like to do to kind of simplify things. So one thing I do is I just go to Finder and I go to settings and I kind of just turn off most of this stuff. I don't really need a lot of this stuff. You don't have to do that. Just letting you know that's why it looks like that. Another thing is I like to use this setting on the view. If you go to view, you can see that you have 4 options for setting. The default option is icons. That's nice and visual. It's easier to see things. This setting is also very useful. This is called list, so you can see everything there. But my favorite setting is number 3. This is called columns. one is not really better than the other. It's just my personal preference. The reason I like columns is it's very easy to see what folders are in what folders and where you can find everything. You can see some of the stuff that I've been recording for the class. There's also gallery. We don't need to look at that. But the other setting that I always change on my Finder is this one down here that says, where is it? Hide path bar or show path bar. So the default is that you don't see that path bar, but the path bar will show you where you are on your computer. You can see I'm on the hard drive, in my user folder, in the Prof. Roberts folder, in the documents folder, and then in the notes folder. And that's really useful. It just lets you know exactly where you are on your computer. So that makes it a lot easier to see where your files are. So you're not going to lose your files. You'll notice that I don't have any files in my downloads. I'm guessing if you look in your downloads folder, there's probably going to be a bunch of stuff in there, maybe stuff that's been there for years. That's fine. No judgment. But I like to keep things nice and organized. It makes it easy to find stuff, and I think you'll find that if you adopt these practices, it'll make your studying and your work life a lot more efficient. Anyway, what we're going to do first, I'm going to click on my documents folder. You can see I have a few folders here with some stuff that I used to prep for the class. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder where I'm going to save all of my demos and projects. And so you can basically do exactly the same thing I'm doing here and kind of follow along with this. So let's switch our view back to columns, which is my favorite view, as I mentioned. Let me see if I can actually, I wonder if I can make the font bigger. I'll worry about that later. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Documents, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click and create a new folder. You can also go to File and do New Folder here. You can also just hit Command-Shift-N on your keyboard and create a new folder there. And I'm gonna call this MMP 100. So this is just my class folder. I'm sure you do this for a lot of your classes. I'm just gonna save all of the projects in here. So the first project that we're going to work on is our Photoshop project, which is a self-portrait project. So I'm going to name this folder self-portrait, and I spelled it wrong, so I just hit enter to rename it, or you can right click and go to rename, or you can double click and rename it that way, or maybe you click. Yeah, you just click once it's already selected. So now I have a nice folder, and the reason I want to do that first is because I'm going to get some images and I'm going to put them in that folder, so that way when I go over to Photoshop and I want to use those images, that's going to make it a lot easier for me to get started with that. Okay, so let's go over to our browser. I'm going to use Chrome. So I'm going to open up Chrome, and we're going to start we're going to throw some images in here. And so I actually already have the images that I want to use, but I'm going to show you how I found those images. So I really just go to Google. I'm in Google already, but let's go ahead and just go to google.com. And so when I want to find an image, in the previous video, I talked a little bit about Creative Commons and licensing for images. And there's a really easy way to find images that you're allowed to use, that you're not going to be infringing on anybody else's copyright. And this is going to be a requirement for the assignment. So just letting you know that up front, you are going to have to post your citations for your images. And if you rip some random image from somewhere on the web and you don't have a citation for it, or it's the wrong citation, you're going to get some points off for that. So just a little heads up, this is a required part of the assignment. So what I want to do is I want to make a composite image, and I'm going to add together a couple of images that are going to kind of look funny together, but I think will be kind of fun to put together. So I already know what they are, but I'm going to show you how I got there. So the first one I think I just Googled New York City. I'm pretty sure. So I Googled New York City, and then I go to the Images tab. And then here's the part that you may not have done before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Tools button right here. And in the Tools section, there's this thing called Usage Rights. And basically, if I have the default, it's just going to show me all sorts of different images that it found on the internet. And pretty much most of those images are owned by somebody. Somebody took the photo or made the drawing, and they own the copyright. And you might be able to buy it from them, but you can't just use it yourself, even though technologically you can. So what I can do here is I can choose Creative Commons license or commercial license. Commercial means you're going to have to pay for it. Creative Commons most likely means that you can use it for free. So I'm going to switch this to Creative Commons. And then I think this is actually pretty similar to the image that I found earlier. Let me see if I can find the image that I found before. I don't see it on here, but I have a link to it, so I'm just going to grab that. But anyway, that's how I found the image. I just Googled something that I wanted, which was New York City. And then I just started to kind of look through various images. And then I know from the beginning that these are Creative Commons images. So you're going to see things like Wikipedia, Wikimedia. Pexels is a website that has lots of images that are Creative Commons. Flickr is another website where people post their photos, and some of them are commercial, but you can also make them Creative Commons. So that's a lot of what you're going to see when you use this Creative Commons license. So this is the image that I actually wanted to use here. I'm just going to paste that in there. And so I found this image of a pigeon looking out at the New York skyline, which I thought was fun. And what I want to do is I'm going to put a lizard friend next to him. So it's going to be a little, kind of funny image gag. So what I want to do is download this image onto my computer so I can open it in Photoshop and then edit it. This is something you may have tried before, but it's not too hard. So one of the things that's nice about Wikimedia is they actually have lots of different sizes for the image. So this is helpful in terms of if you know how big you want your image to be, you can go with a specific size. I don't really know exactly what size I'm going to be using, so I'm going to go with the largest size. I'm going to go with this big 1800 by 1800 pixels. So if you're not sure how big it is, go larger, unless it's like crazy, it's like 10,000 pixels, because you can always make things smaller without losing detail. You can't usually make things larger without losing detail. So that's the image that I want. There's a lot of ways I can get this on my computer. I can right click and click Save Image As. That's going to bring up this dialog box. And the first thing I want to do, you'll see it has the default is the downloads folder. And that's probably what you do. You hit enter and it saves there. And that's why your downloads folder probably has a million files in it. But what I'm going to do is click on this little arrow. This brings up my Finder window. I'll go to Documents, go to my MMP 100, find my self-portrait folder, and I'm going to save that right there. I could also, there's a big download button right here, so I could just download, but that's going to download every single image. I don't really want to do that. And I could also just drag it. If I drag on this image, and at the same time, I can drag it over to my Finder, and that will kind of open it up like that. I can do it that way. I can also drag, and then what I'm doing on my keyboard is I'm hitting Command and Tab, and that shows me all the applications I have open. And so if I switch over to my Finder, I can drop it in there. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but that's however you want to do it is fine. So I have my first image, and now what I want to do is I'm going to get a lizard to composite with this image. One thing I want to make sure is I don't want to lose where I found this image, because I need to cite the creator of this image when I publish my project. So this was originally posted on Flickr by this author 01. I have all the information that I need here, so I don't actually need to go to that page. I can just use this information, but I could go to the original Flickr and take a look at that. And here is the actual license information. So that's important. You're going to have to put that on your post when you turn in the assignment. And the nice thing about this is it actually has a link to the actual license that it's referencing. So this is a Creative Commons license, and it's a little bit different. Creative Commons licenses have different rules. So the most permissive license just has no rules. You can do whatever you want. This one has a couple rules. BY, I think, is attribution. And then SA means share alike. That means that if I make something with this image, I can, when I distribute it, I have to use the same license. So that is a little restrictive. So it says I can share this, I can adapt this, but I have to give credit to the person who created it. So somewhere on the site where I use it, I have to say who created it. And then share alike means what it says here. If you remix, transform, or build upon this material, you must distribute your conditions under the same license. So this is actually a little bit restrictive. This is saying if I make an image, I can't sell it. I have to create it with I have to distribute it with a Creative Commons license. So if you're trying to make something that you want to sell or make money off of, this is not going to be the license for you. But for us, as making a school project, that's perfectly fine. So we're gonna go with that. But I'm not gonna do anything with that right now. I'm just gonna bookmark this in my Chrome bookmarks bar. You can also just write it down or save it somewhere. Maybe I'll just copy it and paste it into our notes here, and I'll save this in my project folder so I don't have to worry about losing this. I'll just go to Documents and go right here and just call this notes.txt. Just want to make sure we don't lose it. You can always reverse image search it, so it's probably not the end of the world, but this will just make that a little easier. Okay, let's get our second image. So I'm just going to type lizard directly into the browser bar and go to Google, go to Images, go to Tools, go to Creative Commons, and there we go. We've got some good lizards. But again, with this one, I already have one that I wanted to use. So I'm just going to copy that and pretend that we found it. And here's another Wikimedia. It's a really good resource. This one is a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0. So I can share, I can remix, but I have to attribute. So it's a little bit more permissive actually than the other license that we used. We have a lot of different options for sizes here. So we have up to 2000 by 2600 by 1600 pixels. That's actually a little bit bigger than what I really need for this. So I'm gonna go with the 1280 by 776. There aren't a lot of specific rules about what the right size of image is. It's something that you're gonna get used to as you see when you want a bigger image, when you want a smaller image. Usually you have a target in mind. If you're making something that you expect people to see on Instagram, you're going to want it to be a certain size versus something that you're going to print out and post as a work of art. That's going to have to be a lot bigger. So that's something that, we'll talk about as we make more projects. Anyway, I'm going to go with this slightly smaller image because that's perfectly fine for what I'm going to do, which is ultimately just create an image that I'm going to post on our class blog. So I'm going to right click here, save image as, and I've got my lizard in here. Okay, so now we're ready to go over to Photoshop. One quick note, if you haven't used Photoshop before, I'm going to open up the class blog real quick because I'm going to find a link here, and I'll put a link in the video description for this, but under our digital imaging topic, the first link that you're going to see right here is register for Adobe Creative Cloud. So this isn't very hard to do. If you haven't done it yet, this is the point at which you need to pause and do it because you're obviously not going to be able to use Photoshop until you have done this. But you're going to go over here and just follow these directions. It really won't take too long. The download might take a few minutes, but well, not a few minutes. It'll take a minute and a half or something. Anyway, you're going to go over to creativecloud.adobe.com. I'm going to open this in a new tab so I can keep the instructions here. And then you're going to use your CUNY login. This is the login that you use for Blackboard. It's not your BMCC email address. So it's first name, last name, the 2 digits at login.cuny.edu. So you're going to go over here and click sign in and put that email address here. And then it's going to take you to the CUNY thing. If I do this, it's just I've already got an account, so it's, I'm not gonna be able to do it again. So I'm gonna skip that part, but you're gonna go through it. One thing, just to, just make sure you don't get to a point where it's asking you for a credit card, because you do, as a student in this class, have a free license to use the Adobe software. So if it's asking you for a credit card, you may have put in your personal email or you may have made a mistake along the way. So if you get to that point, just back up and try it again. But you should be able to quickly download Adobe. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you this Creative Cloud application, and then you can look at all the apps and you can download the apps and open the apps. And so once you do that, you'll be able to open Adobe. You can see I have Photoshop here. I can click open and it's going to open it up for me. And there's Photoshop. So definitely let me know if you have any issues with that. If you have any trouble registering, you are going to have to use this software. So you're not going to be able to finish the class assignments without this software. So you definitely need to let me know if you're having any issues with that. We can go over how to get it set up. Okay, so let's go back to Photoshop. And we're just going to go over a few basics today. We're going to continue to go over basics in future videos as we continue to learn Photoshop. What we're going to do is create a new file. So you'll probably see some like welcome to Photoshop dialog. You can just get rid of that. Or if you want to click through it, that's fine. I'm going to click on new file here. And they have a bunch of different presets. Some of them are useful. Some of them are not going to be particularly useful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to web. And I'm making something for the web. They have some suggestions. I'm going to go with the smaller web minimum. I don't need to make a huge image here. Web minimum is going to be perfectly fine for what I want to do. Over here, it shows me the width and height. And then I can set that in terms of pixels or other dimensions like inches or millimeters. But pixels, we're making something for the web. We don't need to worry about printing. We're just going to go with pixels. Then we have the orientation. This is just whether it's wider than it is tall or vice versa. And then there's a section for artboards. I'm going to turn this off. I don't really need to use artboards. I don't think we're going to need to use it here. There's a resolution. This doesn't matter for us because we are not going to be printing, so just ignore that. Here's a color mode. Remember in the last video when I was talking about RGB and I was talking about bits? There we go. There's our 8 bits of data for our colors. We have a background color that we can set if we want just a white background. We really don't particularly care about that, but everything else we can just go ahead and click create. And there we go. We have our first Photoshop document. It's just a big white background. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our images in here. And we're going to go over the main thing we're going to do in this demo is actually very simple. We're just going to learn how to take part of one image and add it into another image. That's kind of the main goal. But I'll go over a couple other things with the interface since this may be the first time that you've used Photoshop. It may not be, and so you could probably skip ahead a little bit if you've used Photoshop before, but I think most of you will definitely want to see this. So my layout looks a little weird, so I'm going to go to the Reset Essentials. This is what yours is probably going to look like. The nice thing about Photoshop, or one nice thing, is you can move all of these different windows around. And so that's really convenient. You can create different types of layouts for different workflows. You can see they also have some presets for things like in this workspace section, painting, photography, graphic, and web. Essentials is usually fine. One thing that I always like to do, I use the layers a lot. I'm just going to grab this layers window and I'm going to drag it around. You can see I can just pop it out and now it's just floating around. But what I want to do is dock it. And to dock something, you got to move something into one of these little areas and you'll see like a little blue animation. And if you drop it there, now it's docked and now it sits right there. And this is usually how I have things set up. Sometimes I'll collapse this if I want a little bit more space. I can just make this smaller. You can move things around, but you probably won't need to move stuff around too much. Another thing that you're probably going to see that I got rid of at some point is this contextual taskbar. This shows different buttons and different things depending on what tool you have selected. I find it annoying because I've been using Photoshop for a long time and they just added it recently. It's probably useful. You might get used to it, but I usually just click hide here. You don't have to do that, but so a couple quick things that you're going to see me do a lot. I'm going to hit the command. If you're on Windows, this is Control, and I'm going to hit 0. That's going to fit my whole image into the window. And then if I hit Command 1, that's going to zoom into the actual pixel dimensions of the image. So they're actually pretty similar right here. If I hit Command plus on the keyboard, I'm going to zoom in. And if I hit Command minus, I'm going to zoom out. And then Command 0, right back to where we were. So you'll see me do that a lot. I'll use other zoom settings at various points, and I'll try to point that out while I'm doing that. Okay, so let's talk about some layers. So we have this background layer, and basically the layers are kind of the most important aspect of Photoshop because we can layer different components on top of each other. That allows us to do the compositing, adding different things together, collaging things, getting different cool effects. So let's just add our images in. And this process is actually very easy. There's two ways to do this. One is just to drag it. That's probably what a lot of you will do. But, there is a, more direct way to do it, which is I can go to File, and I can go to Import, and I can say Images from Device. Oh, no, I don't have a device. That's the wrong one. What do I want to use here? Import. Just gonna search this. Actually, this is a good thing to talk about. This help thing is really useful because if I don't remember where to get something, I'm gonna import an image. I guess this is what it wants me to do. Huh, that's not really what I want to do. Okay, let's try import. Let's just try import. Huh, that's weird. All right, well, we're gonna have to drag and drop. I don't really know. I guess they don't have this anymore. That's kind of strange. I'll have to look at that later, but that feels like it should definitely be there. Anyway, let's go to our Finder. And so this is actually easier anyway. I'm just gonna drag this over here and drop it right there. And there it is. And when you first drop the image, it's gonna have these little blue squares on it. And that's called the transformation. This basically lets you resize the image to how large you want it. And I want it to be very large. I want it to take up the entire canvas. So I'm gonna move these little squares until it lines up with each edge. The image is a little bit bigger than my document canvas, but that's fine. And I'm just gonna move him down a little bit. Definitely wanna make sure we cover the whole canvas. And once I get him where I want him, I'm just gonna hit enter. And now I'm gonna hit Command 0, and there we go. Another thing when we're zoomed in, something I'll do a lot is if I want to move around without moving stuff by accident, I hold the space bar and you can see that turns my mouse into a little hand. And now I'm moving the canvas around, but I'm not actually changing the position of the image. So that's really, really useful. So now I'll hit Command 0 to zoom back in. So the first tool up here is called the Move tool. And this actually lets me move the image around, which is pretty nice, but I don't actually want to do that. So one thing that I'll typically do is I will lock this layer right here. So now, actually, let's undo the move first. To undo, just hit Command Z, and you can undo a whole bunch of times. So if I move this and go like this, I can hit Command Z and it'll undo. And if I want to keep going, just keep hitting Command or Control Z. Okay, so I'm gonna lock this. Now, if I click on it, nothing happens because it's locked, so I can't move it. Just I want to do this is going to be my background image, and I'm going to composite on top of this. Okay, so now if I want to do stuff, like let's say I want to draw some funny text, I'm going to click on my brush here, and I'm just going to draw around. Look at how it created a new layer. So I can't actually draw on the image layer. If I want to draw something, it's going to make a new layer like that. And we're not really going to use this for drawing. You could draw in here if you want, but you could play around with the brush settings. You can choose a color like this. You can go up here to the brush settings and make a larger brush if you want to. That's not really what we're going to be working on today, but that is one of the things. A lot of people use Photoshop to paint, backgrounds for cartoons or large paintings or all sorts of different things. And there's lots of different cool brush settings that let you paint different stuff. But anyway, I don't really want this layer, so I'm gonna get rid of it. One thing, if I think I might want this later, I can click on this little eyeball and that'll make it disappear, but then I can click on the eyeball again and it comes back. So I can see what it looks like without that little brush drawing, and then I can bring it back. So let's delete this. So down here, there's some buttons at the very bottom of the layers section. If you see my mouse down at the bottom right, and the very far right is a little trash can that just deletes this layer, and it's gonna ask me, are you sure? And I say yes. Okay, so now I'm back to my image. And so now we're just gonna add our next image on here. So I'm gonna go back to my Finder, and here's my lizard image, and I'm gonna throw this on top. There we go. And I'm gonna size this down because it's quite big, and I wanna sit him next to my penguin or pigeon. So I'm just gonna scale it down by grabbing the top right square, and I'm gonna move him over. And when I first add an image, I just have to get it where I want it. I can always move it later. Let's use the space bar to move this over. I'm actually gonna make him even smaller. And I'm gonna hit Command plus to zoom in a little bit. And I'm just gonna kind of line him up where I think I want him to go. And maybe scale him down just a little bit. And once I've got him where I want him, I just hit enter. And there we go. Now I've got my lizard. I can turn this on and off, and I can start to play with the lizard. One thing that I do a lot, if I want to do some stuff with this lizard, but I don't want to mess up the original layer, I can click on this layer and go to the layer menu, which is this little hamburger lines menu right here, and go to duplicate layer. So now I can edit this copy, and then if I make a mistake, I can just go back to the original. So let's play with this lizard image a little bit. And what I want to do, this is compositing. This is one of the basic things we do with compositing is we remove a background from one image so that we can put an object from the image into another image. So what I'm going to do, there's a really simple tool to use to do this called the object selection tool. I'm going to click on that. And what this is going to do is it's going to analyze the image, and then it'll find parts of the image for me. So it should find my lizard, although it looks like it sees this as one big image. I may have made it a little too small. Let's size it up and see if we do better. So I'm just hitting, oh, sorry, what I did there is I hit Command T to transform, and then I size the lizard back up, and then I hit Enter to do that. So now I can find the lizard. So I made it a little too small. So I'm going to grab the lizard. And when I do that, it makes these little dots. These are called the marching ants. And these dots represent what's called a selection. That's a part of the image. And what we can do now is create a mask. And what that means is that it only shows the part of the image that's selected. So we can see it's not 100% perfect, like we're missing some parts of our lizard. Photoshop wasn't able to completely find the object correctly. But if I can edit the mask after I add it. So that's what we're going to try. So down here is the mask button. It's very small. It just looks like a square with a circle inside of it. A lot of people kind of forget this step, but all I have to do is click on that and my background's gone. And look at the sort of little black thumbnail that shows right here. That shows us the part of the image that's basically allowed to go through the mask. A mask is something that kind of like blocks something. And so a mask here is blocking out the background, and it's only letting the lizard show through. So let's edit the mask a little bit. I'm actually going to turn off the pigeon for a second to make this easier. And I'm going to double click on the mask. And it's going to say, what do you want to do? I'm going to enter and select the mask. And so this is the mask editor, and I can use the brush as a tool. I was painting before with the brush now, but now what I'm going to do is actually paint the data of the mask of what I want to be allowed to show through. There's different ways to do this. My preferred way is to go to this view section, and I'm going to change this to the red overlay. This makes it a little bit easier to see what's part of the mask and what's not. So for example, you can see there's these little details on the lizard that didn't make it into the mask that Photoshop created. So then I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to paint the parts that I want to show through. And it's a little bit smart. You can see I'm kind of just dragging it around, but it's actually kind of guessing what I'm painting on. And if you make a mistake, if you go a little bit too far, what you can do is hold the Option or Alt key on the keyboard, and that will paint red on. So that will block out those sections. And so I'm just going to zoom way in. I'm going to find the parts of the lizard that I want to show through. And if I need a smaller brush, I just go up here to the size and make it a little smaller. And just kind of paint through. So I could spend a lot of time getting this exactly perfect. I'm not going to do that just for the demo's sake. It's already been going for a little bit. But let's just grab the rest of his like toe over here, and then I'll hit Alt to draw this part back in. And this is what photo retouchers do. They spend a lot of time doing details like this. Actually, this red is just part of the lizard. I forgot he has a lot of different colors. I can't really tell if this is part of the lizard. Yeah, I think that is his arm right there. Okay, so let's bring that back in, and then we'll paint this back. And this is all looking pretty good. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time much more time here. I'm just going to click OK. And we'll zoom out and let's see how it looks with the background. It looks okay. I might actually just delete that hand. You know, it kind of looks weird, but it'll probably look fine when I make it smaller. So now that we've got this a little bit masked out better, excuse me, I'm gonna hit Command T to transform. You can also find that by going to Edit and going to Transform. And I'm gonna make him smaller. And I'm gonna bring him over here and just place him, we'll place him right at the edge, just hanging out with his pigeon buddy. Although we can still see, okay, I'll put him right there. And then once I've got him where I want him, maybe I'll move him down just a bit. There we go. I'll hit Enter. And now we've got a lizard and a pigeon. So this is, you know, pretty exciting. It's pretty fun. There's a lot more we can do with this, obviously. This is kind of the main thing I wanted to cover, though. So I'm going to kind of pause here for a second, and then I'll go over exporting the image. But for you, for this assignment, you can think about different things that you might want to create. The basic prompt for the assignment, if we go back to the website for a second, the basic prompt for the assignment is to create a self-portrait. And, you know, this is just something to get you started. Obviously, my self-portrait doesn't make that much sense. I do live in New York, but I don't, you know, I'm not a pigeon or a lizard, but it's just kind of fun to make. So you can kind of be creative and do something that might be interesting to you. You don't necessarily have to, you know, do something that actually looks like yourself. Although if you want to, you know, feel free to do that. I may post some examples of previous student work, just to give some examples. But for now, I want you to get started. Just think about what would be a cool image to represent yourself and what are maybe a couple different sources that you can put together to do that. Okay, so let's do our last bit. So we're gonna go over a bunch more things in the next video, but this is enough to cover for now. One thing that you'll probably notice is that you can kind of tell that the lizard has different lighting and stuff like that. So we're gonna go over some cool effects and adjustments we can do to kind of make it look like they're in the same, you know, visual space. Okay, so now we just need to export a file. So I'm gonna save this and we're gonna take a look at a couple different things. So when I save this, I'm gonna go to Documents, go to MMP 100 and go to Self-Portrait. And I'm gonna save this as self-portrait.psd. And one thing that we'll notice if we open up our Finder, when we look at this PSD, we can actually see a preview of this, but if you tried to publish this on a blog or text this to somebody, it wouldn't work. Most devices can't actually read this format because it's quite large. You can see it's 8 megabytes. That might not mean much to you, but it's a lot of data. It's a lot of information. And that's because it saves all of the different things we've done here. So for example, I can take the lizard out, I can take the pigeon out. It saves all of these layers. It saves all the different things that we've added in Photoshop so that we can leave Photoshop, you know, save the image, and then we can come back later and continue to edit it. But we don't want to, you know, necessarily send all that information in a text or on a blog. So what we do when we're done with our image is we export a final file. To do this, we're going to go to File, we're going to go to Export, and I'm going to go to Export As. And so for this one, we're going to use the JPEG format. This is a format that makes the image a lot smaller, and so that way, you know, it won't take up as much space. It's easier to post online and stuff like that. You can see there's a quality level, and it's hard to tell from this view, but if we zoom in a lot, you'll see what that does. So let's take a look first at the highest quality, which is 7. If we look over here, it shows us that our image is 941 kilobytes. So remember we talked about bits and bytes earlier. Remember, a byte is 8 bits. So a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. So that's 1,000 times 8. And this image is 941 of those kilobytes. So it's 941,000 bytes times 8. That's how many zeros and ones make up our pigeon image. So 940 is actually not so bad, but we can probably get it smaller without losing too much quality. What I can do is zoom in, and look what happens when I move the quality to 0. See, it looks much worse because one of the things that it does to make it smaller in file size is it doesn't save as many colors. So it reuses the same colors a lot. We don't get as much data. It also makes these kind of blocks of color. You can see these bigger blocks. So it doesn't really look good. But if you zoom out a lot, you might not be able to tell the difference, especially if it's just on Instagram or you're scrolling through your phone. I think we can do a little bit better than that. And 50 kilobytes obviously is very small. It's much smaller than 900 kilobytes. I think we can do maybe 5. Let's see how that looks. So that looks not bad. It looks pretty good, and it's 260 kilobytes. That's actually really nice. That's very good. So that's going to be good for us. And the width is 1024 pixels. When we post that on the blog in the next video, you're going to see that's a very good amount of width to use. We don't really want much smaller than that, but we don't need a lot larger than that. So that's going to be good. Height is 768. That's very typical. The scale, that's 100%. We can make it larger if we want to here. But everything else here looks good. So I'm going to click export, and we're going to make sure to put this in the right place. So it brings up our Finder. We're going to go to MMP 100, self-portrait, and I'm going to save this as self-portrait. I'm going to put a 1 here because I might save more later, and just click save. So now when we go back to the Finder, there's our self-portrait 1. So this is 260 kilobytes. So again, it's 267,000 bytes. So that times 8 bits versus our PSD is 8.8 megabytes. So a megabyte is what it sounds like. It's more than a kilobyte, which is 1,000 bytes. A megabyte is 1,000,000 bytes. So, or maybe it's 100,000 bytes. I don't want to give the wrong. How much is a megabyte? A megabyte is 1,000,000 bytes. Okay, so it's a lot more information. 1 megabyte is larger than 900 kilobytes. 8 megabytes is 8 times basically what our previous image was. So this image is a lot smaller. It's also something that you can send to somebody on your phone and publish online and do stuff with. So this is our first version. We're gonna make it look a lot better in the next video, but just to kind of get things started, this is what we've got. So I'm gonna make one more much quicker video. This one is a little bit long because we're learning a lot of things for the first time. I'm gonna put timestamps in there so that you can skip ahead if you're already familiar with some of these concepts. But in the next video, it's gonna be very short. I'm just gonna go over how to publish this on our class blog.